am going live today. Hi, everyone, because I am too lazy and should I say too tired to do an editing after the video. So I'll try to make sure I am addressing what you need to address because I do have a tendency to go a bit off script. Um, Today I am answering questions. So I got a question that I thought was really important to answer, and another question that I felt was just good to answer. So it's not really important. But someone did ask me, why are you doing this now, Demi? Like, what exactly is this about? Are you trying to become a content creator? And I'm like, I'm not trying to become a content creator. I have a YouTube channel that has almost 20,000 subscribers, and it's a biology A level channel because I like to share knowledge. And when I was working at a leadership academy, one of the subjects that I taught was A level biology. And so I thought, why not just put the information out there, demystify it for students? And I've gotten a lot of feedback from students where they're like, hey, I got an A star because of your videos and so on. So, in terms of kicking off a content creation career, this is not it at all. What I am doing, or why I am doing this, is because I feel like I've navigated life on my own since I was 16, so made decisions, lived with the consequences of those decisions. And day after day, I meet people who are also navigating life and are quite confused and do not want to voice out, not that they don't want to voice it out, but they don't feel like if they voiced out their questions or their fears, people would hear them out. A lot of them are like, oh, why am I, why am I on the path I'm on? I don't really understand what I'm doing with myself. And I think people feel like if they voice that out, it makes them feel less confident than they actually are. So they don't want to do that. So they would rather just, keep them inside. But some of the things I notice when we start to get deep into conversation is that people have these questions, they're voicing them out differently. And I thought, you know what, it would be a great idea to have this as a YouTube channel. To be honest, I didn't even want to put my face out there at first. My intention was to make this an audio thing. But then I spoke to one of my friends, and she was like, it would be really great if people could see the face of the person who's telling them all these things. Hence, you have the joy of seeing my face almost every week. And also, you have the joy of seeing Morayo and I record videos together, where she also asks me questions as someone in her 20s and me in my 30s. So that's the whole point of me doing this. There's nothing else that's being kicked off. And going live today, it was really just like, I am so flipping lazy. I have a bit of a drip drip situation with my nose, so that's why I'm having mulled apple cider with black pepper in it. I absolutely love it with black pepper. It's just such a good kick. So yeah, that's the one question that's, I guess, is good to answer in terms of like why this is called Let's Have Tea. Again, I've said it, I'm not talking about tea, even though I tend to show up on all my videos with a cup of something, something. I drink a lot of tea, but it's really just like me saying, let's talk. So today, what we are going to talk about is a question I got on the form. And I should say before I read out this question that if you are watching any of my videos and you're like, what's she talking about? Like, why is she just going on these random rants about life and blah, blah, blah? You can ask questions on a form that I will put in the description box. And you can ask any questions. So there are specific themes that I identified because I thought those would be big things people cared about. But there's also like a part at the bottom where you can ask as many questions as you want in one go. And it's all anonymous. I don't need to know your name. I don't need to know what you're about. You can just, if you even want to post a dilemma there, you're free to do so. So yeah, please go for it. By all means, I am happy to answer any questions as long as they do not pry too much into my private life. Not that I have that much of a private life. I don't know. People say I'm quite private, but I don't know about that. Anyway, this is what I said. This is why recording live is such an interesting because I just go off on a tangent. So let's read this question. It says, how do you reconcile where you are in life versus where you thought you would be? So I wrote it on my little sticky note just the way I got it because I wanted to read it out. And before I go into this, I'm just going to take a little sip because why not? Why not? Mulled apple cider is the best thing ever. Please, everyone get on this train. So I really loved this question and I thought to dedicate its own video to it. So I'm not answering any other questions besides this one, mostly because I can relate. So when I was, I mean, I guess everyone can relate to this in some way or the other. When I was in my early 20s, I had a vision for my life. It was like, yep, a girl's gonna get married at 25 because I'll be done with my master's degree, and then I will have two kids before I'm 30, snap back, and then all will be well with the world, and my life will really just be set, and I will keep living and enjoying my life, dealing with the rigors and changes of like being married and kids growing up and blah, blah, blah. And obviously, in the midst of all of this, there was a fantastic career also planned out. And I had a vision of what I would be like at work and the kind of work I would do and blah, 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 blah. In my 30s, well, first of all, I'm not married, in case anyone's wondering. Not that I'm not wearing a ring, I'm just not married. Um, and also, I changed my career in my 30s. So, recently completed a degree. Well, it's not that recent, actually. I keep saying recently because it feels like it was yesterday. Recently completed a degree, did a whole career change. I love what I do now. In case you haven't watched other videos, I've spoken about navigating a career pivot. But the point of that is just to say that the plan that I had for my life in terms of like a vision and this is what I'm going to do and this is how it's going to go just didn't work out. And I got to a point where I had to figure out exactly what I was doing with myself because nothing worked out. I'll tell you, I finished my undergrad degree at one of the top universities on the African continent, Stellenbosch. And Stellenbosch is a great university, beautiful. It's outside Cape Town, so really good vibes, all of that. Obviously, it's had its issues. It had its issues when I was there, but I still sort of found a way to enjoy it. And when I finished that, my plan was to go and do a master's immediately. But I had an issue with my supervisor during while I was at Stellenbosch. And of course, we can talk about this at some point. We should actually discuss the isms I've had to deal with since leaving home at 16. But studied at Stellenbosch. I was going to do my master's right after, but that didn't work out. So I ended up moving back to where I finished high school, which was Pretoria in South Africa. So I moved back to Pretoria and I was looking for a job. And obviously, there was this sense of I went to one of the best universities in the country. I studied a degree that's like science and all that. Why wouldn't I get a job? Well, honey, I did not get a job. Like when I say I did not get a job in my field, I didn't. I ended up resorting to writing articles for websites. So some of the first apps that were released on cell phones were reviewed by me. Yes, 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 yes. I am the ghostwriter behind some of those app reviews. Some of them were reviewed by me. Obviously, I didn't know that this could become a big thing. It was just something I was doing for survival, and I did that for almost a year. I also had a tutoring thing where I was tutoring undergrad students who genuinely did not want to be there because they didn't care that much about the subject. It was microbiology, and for them, it was like, why would I like? It's microbiology, it's bacteria. Like they just didn't care. So I was doing that. I couldn't get a job. That's the whole point. And it was so bad that at some point, the first tutoring contract I got um, was with someone who lived like in the suburbs of Pretoria. Like I'm talking about, what's that area called? Waterkloof, like the Waterkloof area, Waterkloof Ridge, Menlyn, like basically past Menlyn. If you know Pretoria, you know these places I'm mentioning, and I'm sorry if you don't, because it just means I'm speaking into the void. But yeah, they were like people who lived in that area. So the very first time I remember when this lady asked me to come and tutor her son, she had assumed I had a car, and I had assumed I could get there with public transport. So I took public transport, and then like basically the guide was like, get off at Menlyn. So I got off by the Menlyn Mall, which is this very gigantic mall in Pretoria, and then had to walk for almost an hour to get to her house. And I don't know what happened, but basically it was just the whole thing there. But what I'm getting to is while I was walking, one of my acquaintances from high school, like who I knew from high school, um, saw me walking down the bridge, and obviously you could tell it was hot in Pretoria. I looked distressed. I was in this heat. I was walking by myself. This is me with my fancy degree from Stellenbosch, thinking, oh yes, girls made it, and can't get a job still. So I'm doing these tutoring gigs as a way to pull in some money. And my friend saw me, but I think he wasn't sure if it was me, so he just sort of drove past. But later that evening, we had a hangout where he happened to be there, and he said to me, "Hey, James, did I see you walking on Menlyn Bridge today?" And there was this panic that I felt in my heart where I just thought, oh my God, someone's seen me fail. And so I said, no, no, it couldn't have been me. Maybe you mistook me for somebody else. Because I was too ashamed to admit that even though I put in all that effort, I got this job. Even though I put in all that effort, I got the degree, I did all the hard work, I still couldn't get a job. So, in terms of reconciling where you thought you would be with where you are in life, I would say that a lot of my experiences took me to a point where I had to start accepting my life as it was. And I think that's one of the most difficult things to do. I'm not saying any of this needs to be a motivational speaker. I should have said this at the beginning of the video, by the way, that when I say I'm doing these recordings, telling people about how I navigated life and some of the things that I went through and how I now live with the consequences of my decisions or whatever, it's not to motivate you. It's just to tell you the reality of how things are and what I believe is possible, which is a lot of things. So um, anyway, there's that story that I thought I would move back to Pretoria, get a fantastic job after studying at Stellenbosch, but that didn't happen. I ended up being invited for my master's by the University of Pretoria. And I think I've said this before, like when I say I was invited, it meant I had applied when I was in Stellenbosch, but they did not process my application. And then a year later, they were like, "Are you still interested?" So I showed up. So that was what happened. It wasn't like, "We've heard of your genius, lady, and we would like you to grace our halls." It wasn't anything like that. So I did that, did the masters, and when I finished the master's degree, and by the way, if you want to post any questions on like the live, you can do so. Any comments, you're free to do so. Well, I hope I opened it up. If I didn't, I apologize, but the video will be publicly available at the end of the live, so you can watch it from the beginning if you missed anything. Um, so yeah, so I did my masters. After the masters, I sort of came to the same point again where it was like, okay, I've put in more effort now. So surely the dream I have for my life has to materialize, right? I've gotten the extra degree that makes me, should I say, puts me ahead above the rest. I still struggled to get a job. Eventually, I got a job at a lab, and that lab it was a weird lab. This lab is in Johannesburg. It's a lab where all the managers were white. And again, like I said, we can discuss the isms I have had to get in touch with since I left my home country when I was young. All the managers were white and all the workers were black. We were not allowed to sit for the whole day. So we would work from 8 o'clock until 4 p.m. and we were not allowed to sit once. We had these heavy safety shoes that we had to walk around in. And I kid you not, like just lifting one leg felt like lifting a tractor. So definitely not the kind of vibe I was envisioning when I thought, oh, I'm getting my master's degree. I finished my master's with a distinction in environmental engineering, and still it just nothing was things were not pairing up. If you get what I'm trying to say, like there was like this work I had done, and then the results were sort of coming in here, and it was like, what are we supposed to do with the gap between? Um, I left that. I got a lecturing position at a university in Johannesburg, and I worked there for a semester, which was what the contract was due for. But then, when it was time to review the contract, the course coordinator decided not to renew my contract. That's a story for another day, and we'll talk about that. So basically, I was just back on this thing where it was like nothing was working out yet again, even though I had put in the effort. When I lectured at the university, I started a mentorship group with the students. I designed case studies that were unique so that they could really get into the core of the subject and understand what they were learning. So I put in the effort. Again, the results were coming in here. So while I thought that if I put in this much effort, the results would meet me up here, I was dealing with what would we call this now? Some sort of discord between what I was doing and what was coming through. What I eventually had to do, I don't want to go through my entire history, but what I eventually had to do was accept, first of all, that this life I was living was just completely shit, and I did not like it. And it meant I had to review what I thought my life would be like and why I thought so. So now I'm going to be a little bit more pointed. Sometimes when we are thinking of where we think we should be, that's defined not necessarily by us, but by the people we've grown up with, the environment we've surrounded ourselves with, our friends, the way people view us. All of those things feed into an expectation of what you think your life should look like. For example, if you are Nigerian like me, Your life is probably, you've got to go to university, and the average Nigerian parent expects you to get a master's degree. And when you get that master's degree, sorry, I don't know why I'm like burping repeatedly, I don't know what's going on. uh, After you get that master's degree, then you have to get married, and it has to be quite speedy, right? So you get married, and then you have the kids, and then everything's fine. So you don't have just one kid; you've got to have two at least. So that's a vision that's defined by the Nigerian society, and sometimes when you deviate from that, people tend to see you as a failure. So if that is what has shaped your thinking growing up, then you also start to feel like a failure because you realize I'm not matching up to the standard of what my society thinks is success. So I had to go in within myself. First of all, I had to mourn all the goals that I thought I would have achieved that I didn't. Like, yeah, I thought I'd be married by 25. I think I was 25 when the person I was dating then married somebody else. So, fun times. Um, I thought I would have kids by 30. By 30, I was fighting a whole different battle. I was fighting depression and anxiety. So I wasn't thinking about if there was any kid around then, they would have hated me. So that wasn't going to work out. Um, I thought that my career would be settled by like 24 because I finished my studies quite early. So it was like, yeah, I could be settled with this, I could have all of this, I could have all of that. Nothing, not when I say nothing, nothing of those things panned out. So I had to sit and first of all mourn all of those things, like mourning a relationship that didn't work out, even though I thought that it was the one. Mourning not having what I thought would be my career at the time, it just didn't work out. And then also just mourning the state I was in because I wasn't happy with where I was. Everything felt uncomfortable. I felt like I wasn't living my true life. And I eventually ended up going to therapy. And that's what I want to talk to you about. If you feel like you're living a life where you thought you would be is different from where you are, first things first, I would say figure out why you think your life should be that vision that you've got. If it's not defined by you from within, then maybe that's not the life you should be living. Yeah? Have that in mind. And I know that's difficult to investigate because even when you're digging deep within, your upbringing and your societal influence still sort of like they have their tentacles in your inner thinking. So just figuring that out is not something that you can do in a day. So you're not just going to lie down and then wake up and be like, ha, I've got it. No, that's not how it works. You, for me, it took months. It took months of me sitting and saying, okay, but why do I feel like I should have this? Or why do I feel like this career is the one? Or I should be at this point in this career and da da da, going through all of that. So investigate that first. The second thing I would say is that if you feel like your life is different from your dream, you might be due for a life pivot. And I think I've sort of become an advocate for people pivoting their lives, mostly because I realize that, again, so many of us are stuck in a way of life that has nothing to do with who we really are on the inside. Now, I told you I studied science, and if you watch any of my past videos, you'll remember that I studied science mostly because my dad wanted a child who would study medicine. And I love my dad, right? I love the fact that he made me a scientist. Like when I say he made me a scientist, he was very deliberate. I had books that was like teach yourself calculus, teach yourself mechanics. Those were my books. Obviously, I also had other books like Enid Blyton and so on. They were much more fun. I also read Shakespeare because of my dad. He made me read the complete works of Shakespeare, I think when I was 12 or 13, and we would discuss the stories, and it was in Victorian English. So he also made me good at poetry. But the reality of that is who I was in terms of like my personality and my strength was not necessarily someone who was going to enjoy sitting in the lab all day. I love interacting with people. I get peopled out, I should tell you that. So if you ever meet me in person and I seem to be a bit like not offish, but just sort of like reserved or low on energy, it's because I've been peopled out. Like I've had too many people interactions and I need to go lie down. So I do have that. I need to balance things out. But just fundamentally, I love interacting with people. I love designing projects, but I hate the process of like running experiments for months on end. I'm not that person. Um, so like just also like investigating that and thinking to myself, even the career I've pursued doesn't seem to be mine, right? It's not even like what I was like what I would have chosen if I had the freedom to discover different things by myself. Perhaps like if there wasn't someone like saying, oh, you should study calculus and you should study electricity and study mechanics and physics and all these other bits of and things, perhaps I would have chosen a different career. That's not, again, an easy thing to come to because, like I said, it's mourning a life you've lived. And at the time I was doing this, I had lived this life for almost 29 years. So it wasn't easy for me to wake up and say, well, I'm just going to leave it all behind and pivot. But I did realize that if I wanted to be happy going forward, I had to pivot my life. If what I'm doing is yielding results that are coming in below the effort, then it means that something's missing. Something's missing. And maybe that thing that's missing is a sign that I am not living my true life. I'm putting in way too much effort, getting in very little results, and I might need to change my path so that the results and the effort are on par with each other. And again, I will keep saying this in every video, not easy. So I did that. I decided to pivot, which is why I did a career pivot. And I think that for most people, that's something that they also need to understand that when you have these kinds of issues, it's a good idea to consider what you need to pivot. I think the third thing that I would say is that you need to understand that your life is yours and yours alone, and nobody is going to live it for you. Nobody is going to, like, yeah, you'll get a lot of applause from people around you if you live up to their expectations or to societal expectations. There'll be people who come up and say, yay, well done, like, oh, you've got a marriage, you have a kid, you have a career, blah blah blah. People don't necessarily ask you if you are happy. And I think that's what you need to start asking yourself. Like, if you were to like achieve this vision that you've got, would you be happy? You might think yes, but you have to dig deep and honestly like investigate and question this. Would you genuinely be happy with this life? Or if you had an alternative life, would that make you happier? So for me, for example, when I started thinking of a career pivot and a life pivot in general, it was like, okay, this is the life I have now. And I genuinely believe in my heart that if I were to achieve all these things and I had all these things in a row, I would be very happy. But then, if I had an alternative life and I had this and I did this and I did this instead, I would also be happy and probably happier. So, why am I chasing this one? So, I would say that that's something you need to think about. Are you living your life for yourself or are you living it for other people? And are you genuinely going to be happy with the life that people expect you to live and this vision that you have for yourself? And the reason I say that again is just that sense of when you are building up, like when you are feeling dissatisfied rather with your life, it's always a good idea to remind yourself that your life is yours to live. You don't have to live for anybody else. You just have to follow through with your own vision of what your life could be. And you need to get comfortable with that. You need to get comfortable with the possibility that the dreams that you had when you were young might not materialize in the way that you want them to or at the time that you want them to. They might not come, they might never even come. That's the other thing. Like, and I know that's a very difficult thing for people to accept. And I know the Christians that are watching right now are like, God forbid, eh? My dream, what are you saying? But that's the reality that there are some things that you want in your life that just would not happen. And it's okay to get comfortable with that. So I would say, um, just have that at the back of your mind. Accept your life as it is. This is a big thing, and I know people struggle with that a lot. Accept your life as it is, and when I say accept your life as it is, I mean don't get so caught up in the sense of what your life could be that you forget what your life is. That distance between where you are and where you want to be, if you dwell in that gap, you will be very unhappy, you will be very anxious, and you'll be very depressed. And I say this as someone who dwelt in that gap for years. So that's something that you should be aware of, that if you keep obsessing over this picture, it makes it difficult for you to deal with what you actually have and figure out how to change it. You can't change a life you haven't accepted. That's just the reality of it. You can't change a life you haven't embraced as the reality of your life. If your life is one of those, I know where I am, but my vision, like you're always forward looking, you will have a lot of anxiety. I say this again, not as a doctor, not as a psychologist, but as someone who has lived it in its full force. Your life will be full of anxiety and it is not worth it. Accept your life as it is, and when you've accepted it, then you can start to figure out what exactly needs to change. What exactly makes you unhappy? What is good about your life? What is the thing that really ails you about your life? Then you start to think about that. So I would say do that. And I think that's it. I don't want to just go on and on for detail just for the sake of filling up the video. But again, I decided to do this live because I want to lie down after this and go to sleep. I feel a bit tired this morning. But yeah, I hope I've answered this question. How do you reconcile where you are in life versus where you thought you would be? My big thing again is just accepting where you are, figuring out what needs to change, and taking the steps to change them. And I'm always happy to share my stories because a girl's been through it. But I also found this quote on Twitter that someone said was from a blog called The Ambitious Woman. And I thought it was an interesting quote that I should share towards the end of this video. It says, emotionally healthy people are quitters. And when I say, how it's always motivational to say, don't quit, keep going. I have learned in my life that there are some things that are worth quitting, and it's okay if I quit them. And that doesn't make me a failure. That doesn't make me a bad person. It's okay to quit a dream that you've had for your life if it no longer fits. It's okay to assess where you're heading in life or what you're pursuing and realize, okay, actually, this doesn't work for me, and let it go. So, emotionally healthy people are quitters. They make choices that align with their well being. This is important. Again, a lot of us will do things even against our own well being. I really encourage you to watch the video I did on how I navigated a career pivot because that was a big example, to be honest, where I was a square peg in a round hole, but I just kept pushing against all odds because I'm the type of person who, if something needs to get done and I need to learn it, I will learn it. Doesn't matter if I don't want it, I can be good at it. That's just who I am. But yeah, they make choices that align with their well being. Quitting a relationship, a partnership, or a job that makes you unhappy is a sign of self awareness. That I will add to that, quitting the vision of where you think your life should be is a sign of self awareness. It's a sign of you saying, I'm pursuing this thing, it's just not heading in the direction I want it to go. So I need to maybe step back from it and reassess my life so that I can do the right thing. That's a sign of self awareness. If someone stays in something bad for too long, it's not because they are strong, but because they are afraid or have low self esteem. I will add to that and say it could also be because they don't have information and don't know how to navigate the change. And that's why I do these videos because I've navigated some of these changes and weird life experiences that some people might be dealing with now. And I want people to know that it's possible to pivot your life, it's possible to change, it's possible to let go of the dream of what you thought your life would be. Um, I mean, like, and when I say let go, I don't mean you necessarily give up, but you let go in the sense that you don't let that become the defining factor of your happiness. So there was a time when in my life, like I said, it was like, yeah, I would be married at 25 and then I'd have two kids before I'm 30 and my career would be amazing and I'd have a house and that house would be in, the northern suburbs of Johannesburg and blah, 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 blah. That for me was what was going to make me happy. I don't have any of those things, but I do live a happy life now. And I think I did that. The way I've achieved that, or the reason I've achieved that rather, is because I've come to a point where I realized I just had to let go of that as a defining factor of happiness and rather think of what really makes me happy on a day-to-day basis. Like what makes me happy that's within my control. So if I had the power, what are the things I could do to make myself happy? I can't make myself get married. And as much as parents, especially Nigerian parents, like to make it seem like you are the reason you're not married, I I've told my mom a couple of times, and I think she's gotten it now, that you can be an amazing person and nobody wants to marry you. Contrary to what many people think, getting married is not within your power. You need another person, except you want to do a sologamy and then it's just you and maybe your dog, and that's fine. But if you want to marry another person, they need to come to a point where they want to get married. They can like you, but they might want to get married, and you're like, okay, it's me, it's me. No, no, it's not you. That's something that's not within your control. Having children, for example, might be somewhat within your control, but if you're dealing with a health condition, then it's not within your control. So the point of this is just like I figured out the things that made me happy that were within my control, which was changing my career, changing where I lived, pursuing a completely different path, opening up to more life experiences, to more people, and just having childlike excitement about the world. That makes me happy. Other things are not within my control, so I do not pursue them. And that helps me to not stay in the gap of where I thought my life would be versus where it actually is. So, yeah, that's it. And I'm going to end the live now. I saw a couple of people join, so thank you to those people. And I will probably try to do another live because I realize this is just straightforward and easy. Yeah, I guess I can fill my day with other things than editing videos. So, all right then. Have a good day, and don't forget, if you want to ask questions, you can post them on the form. The link is at the bottom, and you should also subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you. Bye.